Hello, everyone. Dr. Vicky here, speaking to you from the Seeds of Transformation Healing Center. It is time to look at the week ahead in astrology. We're going to be looking at the week from Sunday, the 15th of December, until Saturday, the 21st. So this is a pretty active week. Um, we start the week off with a full moon in the sign of Gemini, with the sun in Sag, of course. That full moon is in a wide but still a square to Neptune. So while full moons bring illumination, that square to Neptune, we're still not quite sure of what we're dealing with. We also have Mercury stationing direct after that. After that full moon in Gemini. And that's pretty interesting because Gemini is a Mercury ruled sign. And so there's a connection there with Mercury. And of course, Mercury at this time is in Sagittarius, which is the sign that the sun is in this full moon. And also Jupiter is in Sagittarius, close to that, um, close to the sun. And of course Jupiter and also square to Saturn. So there's a lot of stress and tension in this full moon, and the full moon does bring illumination. And then of course we're ending the week with the first day of winter here in the northern hemisphere, first day of summer in the southern hemisphere. It is the longest night, the shortest day here in the northern hemisphere, and there's a lot of symbology with that, which we'll talk about. We'll get into it. We'll look at the charts, but before we do that, I want to welcome my tried and true subscribers. I'm going to welcome you first because you've been with me for a long time, and for those of you who have joined this wonderful community, welcome, welcome to my new subscribers. I appreciate you taking the time out to hear what I have to say about these subjects. And I think the information is important, and I'm glad to share it with you. So let's jump into the presentation because I always make it a presentation. I like pretty pictures and the like. So let's get started with that. So before we get into the astrology proper, I just will quickly go over the numerology and Kabbalah associated with December 24th. I usually do something right at the beginning of the month where I really dig into this, but I do like to repeat it because it's definitely worth a repetition. We are in an 8 universal year vibration, that 8 universal year. This is the last month of that universal year of 8. 8 is associated with the Strength card in the tarot and the sign of Leo. On the Tree of Life, it is located here. Is there anything significant happening in Leo this month? Well, yes, there is. Mars spends the whole month in Leo, most of it retrograde. Mars went retrograde on the 6th. I know all of us felt it. But of course, we're a little bit past that now, but we still have Mars moving retrograde. It has been actually in a trine with the north node of the moon in Aries and Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. That will be opening up, that will be starting to dissolve this week as Mercury starts to move forward because the nodes of the moon and actually um, and Mars retrograde are sort of moving together. The mean motion of the nodes is retrograde. And so when we're looking at nodes, it starts at 30 and it ends at 1. Okay, and we're right around, I think, 2, but we'll see it on the chart. 2 something, maybe we're at 3 degrees, north node in Aries, south node in Libra. And 8, of course, is a vibration of as you sow, so shall you reap. It's a great manifesting vibration. And so a lot of people are manifesting the seeds they have planted over the last really 7 or 8 years. And there is a certain amount of instant manifestation that comes. We are not done with this year yet. And so we could still see some karmic, the other side of some karma before the year is out. We're in a 12 vibration month. Of course, the 12 in the tarot is the Hanged Man. It is associated with the planet Neptune. Is Neptune doing anything interesting this week, I mean this month. Yes, it stationed direct on December 7th. That was the same day that Venus went into Aquarius and conjoined Pluto. It is associated with the element of water, Mayim. And the Hanged Man really teaches us uh, what we have control over and how we can attend to that, and what we don't, and have to let it go. So there really is a sense of a little bit of a being in limbo kind of sense, sort of waiting to see what happens. It also requires us to look at things from a different perspective. So do that for yourself. If you're going down a road that's difficult, like a mental exercise, if this happens, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. And you're sort of putting yourself down that road. If it's not a road that's necessarily pleasant and brings up a lot of fear for you, it's not necessarily a bad thing to look down the road. It's just that you don't want to spend all your time on the road. And so what you do is you look at that from a different perspective. And a lot of times our expectations are the things that undo us, whether they be negative or positive expectations of a situation. So we just have to keep that in mind. All right. And then, of course, when you add these two vibrations together, we get the 20 over 2. 8 plus 12 is 20. 20 over 2 is the judgment card, right? Inevitability. It's the awakening. It's resurrection. It's the card of resurrection, and it is associated with the element of fire. Shin is the Hebrew letter on this path on the tree of life, and this is where it sits between Mercury, which this month starts the month retrograde and goes direct today on the 15th, and then the Earth. Malkuth is associated with the Earth, and we have the Earth this month in Gemini and Cancer. The Earth is always in the opposite sign of the Sun. And this is the 20 over 2 vibration. It is about, so it says a spiritual awakening with this vibration. There are revelations. Act decisively and gather the facts and look at the larger picture before you make your decision. Um, all right, so let's continue. All right, let's go into the astrology now. So today we're just going to be going over the left side of this. Over here, week 3. There isn't a whole lot going on, but of course we have the full moon and we have the sun ingress into Capricorn, which are both pretty big things to be happening. So we have plenty to talk about. The other side here, the right side, will be week 4. We'll do that next week. Here we can see this is the Sephiroth of Mercury. We have Mercury in Sag this month. It was retrograde, and today it goes direct. We have the sun moving from Sag into Capricorn this week, so there's a shift. Um, and that's all we can really see on that. Um, Okay, let's continue. We'll go right to the full moon. Okay, so we have the full moon. Now this full moon happened, I believe it was like 4 o'clock in the morning here on the East Coast this morning. For those of you who were lucky enough to see the moon yesterday as it was rising, it rising in like seeking out its fullness, which would happen early in the morning on the next day than yesterday, right? It was a very powerful moon. In fact, it surprised me a couple of times. We were driving, well, my husband was driving down the road, and I looked over and was like shocked because the moon was enormous. It was enormous in the sky, and you could feel it. The sky is really energetic. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that more and more people are looking to the heavens for answers. And so the heavens are going to reply, right? Um, but there's just, it feels like we're on the edge of something big. And honestly, I don't see it as disaster and World War III or the dissolution of the American experiment failing. I don't see it like that. I think there's a higher truth here that we need to be aware of. or at least have a higher perspective. I watched Ona's um, Time Out with Giblets this morning, and Giblets always picks a animal oracle card, and he picked the giraffe today, which is about looking at things from a higher perspective. And I think that's really what um, the sun in Sag says. The sun in Sag says, look at perspective, perspective, perspective. The moon doesn't have a lot of perspective, right? The moon is how we react and respond to life. And so it's based on our history. It's based oftentimes on the past. It's based on how secure we feel, right? We have we have the moon in Gemini, and Gemini is our ability to communicate and the like. And we have Jupiter in a pretty close conjunction. What is that? About 7 degrees. So it's still considered a conjunction. Jupiter is the ruler of the Sag Sun, um, and Mercury, which is the ruler of the Gemini moon, is in Sag, and we see this Sag Gemini oppositional energy between Mercury and Jupiter. Both of these planets are they're in mutual reception to each other. Uh, Now we have Mercury stationed here. It's not quite moving direct yet. It's standing still. When a planet stands still, there's a lot of energy. So the Sabian symbol for this planet is going to be very important, and we will talk about it when we get to it. But let's take a look at the Sabian symbols for this full moon. The 24 of Gemini, that's right here. Um, Children skating on ice, refusing to be defeated. The creative mind is not frozen into uselessness by situations that appear impossibly restrictive to others. In fact, the awakened individual seeks challenges in order that they can rise to the occasion and develop further skills and maturity. That, in opposition to Sag, 24 of Sag, a bluebird perched on the gate of a cottage, peace and happiness. I want to tell you a little story before I go further with this. This past winter, like February, I think it was, um, I had some suet out for the birds, and I had never seen this before, but we had what looked like a family of bluebirds, right? Remember that song when you were little? Bluebirds, bluebirds, in and out my window. Bluebirds, bluebirds, in and out my window. Bluebirds are symbols of happiness and joy and fertility and the coming spring. And I saw bluebirds for the first time in my yard. And I have to say, while it hasn't been easy to bear witness to what's been going on in the outer world, my world is really quite nice and has been getting nicer, which, it's not a boast because I couldn't say that about many of my years, but this year really did feel like something turned. And then we had like an hour long rainbow over our house. That was also pretty exciting. But the bluebird brings that energy of hope, right? Hope. Blue is the color of peace. So it says the formula for life, though complex, true, is reliable. When we get it right, we experience a serene easiness of being. So if you're feeling serenely, that serene, I'm sorry, ah, so serene experience, serene easiness of being. I'm sorry that the language is not, I didn't write that. That's from James Burgess um, on the Sabian symbols. But I feel that. And no matter how terrible, and of course, the day after the election, it was hard to find that. Let's be real here. And yet I was still able to access it in points along the day, and have continuously applied myself to accessing that joy point, that serenity point, and knowing that me losing my mind over something and making my life more difficult because of what's going on in the outer world is not necessarily going to help the situation in the outer world, and certainly not going to help me to navigate this time. So I think that's probably a good sort of thing to keep in mind. It says finding inner peace and radiating beauty. There are rewards for those who manage both to blend into the community and yet still maintain their own style of being. So it's important to contribute, it's important to be a part, but you have to keep your own sense of self within you very, very strong. All right, just give me a second here. Okay, sorry about that. My husband had to tell me something. Oh, I have to get my tea, excuse me. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, oh. I have a little heater for my tea, but it's not plugged in. So then it doesn't work. I'm like, why is my tea not staying warm? I'll deal with that later. All right, back to the bluebirds in and out my window. Um, there are rewards for those who manage both to blend into the community and still maintain their own style of being. These rewards tend not to be measured by things or money, but by nuances of beauty and contentment. That which makes using spontaneously makes us sing spontaneously when we are just puttering around the house, or the garage, or the art studio, or the library, or the neighborhood. It's important to always to always be able to find a peaceful piece of your life that you can hook into when necessary. And I think that's part of the awareness of this, because the Sag Gemini axis is about what we believe, what we know, the information we get, how we take that information and create a philosophy of life that works for us. And we do have Neptune sort of doing that square. You can see it here. It's pretty, squares are usually square about 5, 6 degrees. And it is right about, 4 degrees maybe here. This is 24 and this is 27. So 3 degrees. So this is a dyed in the wool square from Neptune. And of course, Neptune is always about a little obfuscation. And, there are quite a few delusional people out there. Keep that in mind. And so when they see they get a realization or an illumination from this full moon, it is colored by Neptune. So that also can make us more optimistic, more idealistic, and it can also make us more delusional. So I just be aware of that happening at this time. And then, of course, the vibration for the day, which is going to be the vibration for the next two things we look at, is the 35-8, which is about healthy boundaries. And this is a Sagittarius card here. It's actually the um, second decan of Sag. And while there's nothing in the second decan of Sag, um, the midpoint between Mercury and the Sun is. Um, and so that really is about illumination of the mind, illumination of the mind. Okay, let's continue. Now we also have the Sun make an inconjunct to Uranus. This is a waning inconjunct. So waning inconjuncts are the point where we need to make adjustments in the way we interact with society so that we can be accepted into society. We have to be willing to let go of something, and it's usually a feeling. And I know how a lot of people are feeling right now, especially after what happened in November. But I think that we have to feel our feelings, so it's not like you don't ignore them as if you could, because they were in our face. And, you know, how many of us were going through the levels of grief, as it were. But I've noticed myself that those are starting to, uh, they still come and go, but they're starting to sort of, I'm able to get out of them um, a little bit easier, which is good, which means that there's a certain amount of acceptance to what is or what is apparently. And again, we shouldn't be surprised if a lot of things, sudden things happen that change it all. So there's that. But I don't know, to put all your hope or all your eggs in that basket that it's going to miraculously, or somebody who's never shown a tendency towards something you think is going to do something. Um, it's not that it can happen, and it very well may, because the energy is there for big change and sudden things and things we weren't expecting. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but you really have to make sure you're not connecting your sense of well-being to that, because then you're putting your sense of well-being in things that are out of your control and out of your hands. And so, what I suggest is that you prepare yourself for eventualities, that things are going to change, maybe not in the best way possible, while staying open to the possibilities and then focusing on the world that you want to see. Because the more energy you put into something, the more likely it is to manifest. So don't put your energy in the negative stuff. Put your energy in the positive stuff. But of course, I said Neptune is square this full moon. So we do have to leave space, because we certainly think we know what's best, but we don't have the biggest picture possible. And it's important that we keep that perspective. And that's really what Sag is all about. So let's just talk about the sun in conjunct Uranus. Says your self-expression urges are often misunderstood by others. Well, isn't that true? Leading to a sense of frustration. Now, of course, Mars is retrograde, right? So that also increases the level of frustration that we're feeling, because we feel like we can't necessarily get done what we want to get done. It says this aspect can make you feel like an outsider, yearning for recognition, yet often feeling alienated. Reflections on this, reflect on this, right? Reflect on that. Um, Recognition via feeling like an outsider. And that's Uranus. Uranus is like total outsider. And if you have a prominent Uranus in your chart, or if you're an Aquarius, a sign that's ruled by Uranus, you're always going to feel a little bit like out of touch. Or I'm not so sure that you got to the party late necessarily, but you maybe didn't get an invitation, and you're not sure if you go into that party if they're going to say, "Hey, I forgot to, I don't know what happened. It just slipped my mind. I'm so glad you're here." Or you're going to get the, "You don't belong in this party. Get the heck out of here," right? That's the challenge. That's the challenge. This aspect can make you feel like an outsider yearning for recognition. Okay, reflect on this. How can you embrace your uniqueness without seeking validation from external sources? And this is true, like in almost everything. And in a way, this is true of what's going to happen in the outer world. We'd like to see certain things happen. We are visualizing that, we're going in that direction, and then something else happens, and it sort of throws us off our pony, I guess. Um, Sometimes getting thrown off the pony, the next few steps, the pony would have fell off a cliff or something, you know. So you can't really judge until we get to the other side of things, I think. By disconnecting from the need to be understood and focusing on the positive outcomes of your actions, you allow the true self to emerge more authentically. It is very important at this time to have healthy boundaries, nine of wands, but also to be authentic. Um, Chiron is in Aries. Aries is the I am. We're being asked to first figure out who we are and then to be that. Then we have Mercury station direct at 7 degrees of Sag. Check this out, right? Cupid knocking at the door. Cupid stirring up of emotion. There is always something going on to keep us from giving up and losing our appetite to stay involved in life's ups and downs. So we're going to feel our emotions stirring, and we need to sort of follow that. We need to follow because we have to acknowledge those feelings. We can't stuff them. It's about acknowledging them. There is always something going on to keep us from giving up. Be receptive to the stirrings of the emotions. And this is the chart. Interestingly enough, this is a chart for the US. This is Washington, D.C., as Mercury stations direct in the house of uh, healthcare, interestingly enough, right? And also the military. Both those are big themes right now, right? And we have a Gemini rising in this chart, interesting, with Jupiter right on the ascendant, Jupiter at 15 retrograde. All right. And this is the trine I was telling you about. We have a fire trine, Mercury retrograde, Mars retrograde. Well, now it's direct. Now it's stationed. So it's not quite direct yet, but it's stopped and it's starting to move forward. And then the North Node in Aries. That's a very powerful. And then the South Node here creates a bit of although this isn't, they're not calling these sextiles. I would call them sextiles. The South Node in Libra is about relationships from the past. So we might find ourselves, especially with all these retrograde motion and Mars, the planet of passion in the sign of love and heart, moving backwards, we might actually hear from an old paramour or something like that that we're not expecting. Um, we also have a bit of we don't quite have a six-pointed star here. Well, actually, let's see. This is at 0. This is at 24. This is kind of a trine here. However, this is an earth. So it's not a complete air fire trine, but we have fire, we have partial air, and then we have a little earth there. A Merkaba, as it were. On Wednesday the 13th, Wednesday the 18th, which is a Queen of Cups day, we have the sun make that square to Neptune. So now the sun, Neptune and the sun are making the exact square of the square that we saw in the full moon chart. This is a last quarter crisis in faith square. You may experience psychological inhibitions, restrictions, and frustrations that pose considerable challenges. Again, we're dealing with the planet of dissolution and illusion and delusion, but also idealism, squaring the sun. The sun is right around the galactic center. And so we'll be getting some cosmic rays from this one. This is a crisis in consciousness, a crisis in faith. This is when we say, this is part of the individuation process, when we become authorities in our own life, what you believe and the like. Okay, so it says the sun at 28 degrees of Pisces, a fertile garden under a full moon. Enough is a feast. Square the sun at 28 of Sag, an old bridge over a beautiful stream, still in constant use, making useful things that are beautiful. We can consecrate our lives more by remembering to marry spiritual qualities with mundane needs, marrying the mundane and the spiritual beautifully, which is interesting because Neptune, the planet, along with the squaring the sun, is spiritual beauty, spiritual beauty. So we can't really we can't really depend on the powers that be to fix things. I mean, they can help, but it's not going to be from them. It's going to be from us. It is grassroots. It's always grassroots. things change from the bottom up because the people on the top are not, they're just fine. They're just fine. They don't have any problems, right? Like how many billionaires are there in Trump's cabinet now, right? And then we had this assassination of the multimillionaire who was part of an organization that pretty much was supposed to be there to help people and ended up just creating misery, that kind of thing. And then we have all these, megalomanias in they paid to play. They paid to play, and that's what's going on here in the US, as many of you know. All right, the sun's ingress into Capricorn. Oh, funny, it's not here. Hold on one second. Let me get that. All right. Well, it was on the next slide. I mixed up my slides. Okay. Sun ingress into Capricorn on Saturday the 21st. This is a 41.5 vibration, which is the Ace of Cups, uh, overflowing of feelings and emotions. Now, the aces are generally, especially the Ace of Cups, is generally a really lovely energy. It's about unconditional love flowing from the hand of God, but it's also it can also be a lot of emotionality, an overflow of the emotions. And it is a 5 vibration, so 5 can bring some chaos. So be aware that this is going to be an extraordinarily emotional time. And when I look at the ingress of a planet into a sign like the sun, it's an illumination of the archetypes of that particular sign, right? And so Capricorn is, Capricorn gets a little bit of a bad rap. Pluto's been in Capricorn for how many years, and our whole life has been turned on its head, right? All the systems that we thought were always be there, we see the dark side of these things, right? So it's a real wake up call anytime Pluto moves through a sign. But Capricorn really is here to teach us to be authorities in our own life, to take responsibility for ourselves, right? And so while the sun is in Capricorn, we will be illuminated to our responsibilities, keeping in mind that there is a lot of emotional upheaval at this time. And then so let's look at the Sabian symbol for Capricorn, an Indian chief demanding recognition, the claiming of power. When the community, when the community's security is threatened, then those who can will claim a position of authority and take command, observing the effects of unrestrained personal power. Interesting here in the US that the pretty much the president has immunity from prosecution if he deems the person he's going against is an enemy. Um, so that's interesting. And then we look at Saturn because Saturn is the natural ruler of Capricorn. I always like to see where Saturn, well, in the case of when a planet moves into Capricorn, where Saturn may be sitting. When Saturn is at 14 degrees of Pisces, it says using glamour as a shield. The real purpose is not revealed by their glamour, but by the real person. Protecting yourself from unwanted intrusive energies. Says glamour is employed by an initiate as a subtle protective disguise. It is far better to avoid conflict using strategy and device than to attract or precipitate the collision of wills. I really need to listen to this because I on my Facebook page I answered a something that one of my cousins wrote to me, and I kind of was a little mean. Or how I see it as mean. It's probably, if you read it, you probably wouldn't think it was mean. But for me, it's kind of mean. And so I'm going to today reach out to that cousin and apologize if I hurt his feelings. I doubt it because he's pretty resilient. He's a Scorpio, but I just want to make sure he knows that it wasn't my intention to to, I don't know, whatever my intention was. Um, so here's the chart. Here is the sun at 0000 of Capricorn. Here's Saturn, Saturn in the fourth house. Um, Capricorn in the house of our resources and our money. I know that we're in, supposedly it's the richest we've ever been, except that only 5 people own it all, in America. But still, the economy not working for everybody, working for some. Um, um, we could imagine that um, we're in better stead, but we are not really sure what's going to happen, seeing who gets in January and what that's going to mean financially. But we'll see. Well, I guess we're going to see. But again, resources are top of mind here. And not just resources, but resourcefulness. Of course, the sun is square the nodes, right? The sun is square the nodes. And so when the sun touches anything, it illuminates. So it's illuminating the karmic axis here with the nodes of the moon. So it illuminates the relationships of the past, and it illuminates the opportunities of the future. We do have the north node in the fifth house of creativity, and the south node in the house of groups. Congress, actually, this is the House of Congress. This is also a house associated with technology. Um, and we do have, with this sun moving into Capricorn, Uranus, the unexpected in the house of allies and open enemies. So there could be a shift and a change in our relationships to both of those considerations. We have Chiron opposite Black Moon Lilith. That's pretty tight. Black Moon Lilith is seeking empowerment of the feminine here, opposite the wounded masculine, perhaps. And so we have this masculine feminine balance here. We just had last week, we had Venus and Mars in an opposition. So oppositions bring awareness, but it can also show us how far apart we are. In the case of Mars and Venus, maybe how far apart men and women are. Um, and in the case of Chiron and Black Moon Lilith, how far we are to healing the wound. We can heal the wounds. We will heal the wounds. We first have to be aware of the wound. And if you look over here, here's Pluto, right? Just recently moved back into Aquarius, and you can see that Mars is in an opposition and is moving backwards. So this opposition is going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And we have 2 more of these oppositions. Um, we have one, I think December. Is it this December? I think, hold on. Maybe it's January. It might be January. Let me just look here real quick. Yeah, January. And then we have another one, I think a few months later. It might be April or it might be March. Of Pluto and Mars. So Pluto and Mars is oppositions. You can project the shadow, you can project your shadow. They're two considered what they would consider difficult or malefic planets, and so that's a problem. And it's very warlike. This is a very warlike combination. So we'll see how that manifests itself, both in, within the parameters of where you live, and then also in the wider world. But we're in a very tense time. We can't fool ourselves about that. But we can't also focus on that completely, because it takes our energy away from co-creating the world with spirit. So it's good to know what's going on, but it's also good to know what you want and the world you want to see, and what kind of steps you need to take to get there. And they can be small steps. Small steps. I think this is going to be for the long run, right? So you don't have to do anything grand and glorious all at once, because if you can't back it up beyond that, then it's kind of useless, right? So we need to be able to put one foot in front of the other and continue on our journey to enlightenment, to expansion, to love, to community, to heaven on earth. All right, guys, I'm going to stop the share. All right, so I will see you this week in the mornings. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. I am going to be doing a membership on this channel come January. I'm going to be putting that stuff up probably this week. Whatever, how much it is and tiers and the like. And I've been dabbling with the idea of teaching from this particular from YouTube, but I do have a Patreon page. It's in the link below. And I think I might use Patreon for my students. So for the students who have been waiting for me to do something like this or waiting to hear, I think maybe we'll stick with Patreon for the students. It may be a little bit more manageable for me. So, all right, guys, have yourself a great day. Take it easy. It's going to be a crazy week. Intense, intense, intense. Take care of yourself. Don't get in the way of things that you're not going to be able to stop anyway. Be in your heart, enjoy your holidays, live the best life that you can, and know that both Spirit has your back and this community is here for you. And not just my community, but all the communities of all the readers who work in the light. Take care of yourselves, everyone. Namaste.